Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. I'm so happy to be here with you today. Where I'm sitting, the sun is streaming in my window and it feels like it's actually spring. And if you don't know, I live in Seattle. And so we get lots of false starts to spring where the sun comes out for one day, but then it rains for 5 days. So today we're having a spring, probably false start, but I'm loving it. And I'm hoping wherever you are, there's a little bit of sun, whether it's literal or figurative sun, streaming in your window. So before we dive in today, a couple housekeeping announcements that are fun, exciting things, I hope, for you all. We, first of all, are going to be doing interviews on the show coming up. So if you've been a follower of the show since the early days before we became Shameless Leadership, when the show was the Shameless Mom Academy, I did 900 episodes of that podcast. And during that time, every other episode, so half of those episodes of 900, so 450 episodes, were interviews. I love interviewing other women. I love interviewing leaders. I love interviewing people with stories and perspectives that are different than my own. I love interviewing people who can share stories that are commonly excluded, underrepresented. I love sharing stories and interviewing folks where there's an opportunity for us to see one another in a different light of humanity and for us to learn from one another. And so I'm going to be interviewing leaders, mostly women leaders, but all sorts of leaders. And I've started doing this already, and it's been absolutely amazing. It's been so fun to be back, like with my interview hat on, back interviewing folks. And so I've started doing this already. We haven't released any yet, but I wanted to let you know, interviews are coming for Shameless Leadership. I could not be more excited. And with that, I thought I really want to honor the people I'm interviewing and up level a little bit. And so the way I decided to do that is to fulfill my child's dream of me launching a YouTube channel. And so I have a 12-year-old boy who, if you know anything about 12-year-olds, like YouTube is the big thing, right? And so my son is excited that his mom is going to become a YouTube star. I mean, that might be a generous term. I don't know about a YouTube star, but we are going to be releasing the show on YouTube soon. So stay tuned for interviews coming up, YouTube channel coming up. All episodes are going to be on YouTube shortly. I've been recording. Starting at episode 930, I started recording everything on video with the intention of those videos getting uploaded. So we're in the process of doing the edits and getting the things uploaded, and that will be happening sometime in the month of May 2025. So that is all coming. If you are a leader who has a great story and wants to maybe share with the audience, reach out to me. Or if there's a leader in your organization who you think could be a great guest, who has something, a unique perspective, who has maybe, overcome adversity, who is doing things a little outside of the box, who is representing themselves, representing leadership, representing maybe marginalized communities and marginalized identities in a special way, please reach out and let me know. I'm looking for incredible people to interview. Now, I will say I have quite a long list already, and I get pitched every single day by many people, but I also know you all as my audience, and I know the stories that you love, and I trust your opinion. So if you have someone great, that if maybe it's you, maybe it's someone else who wants to come on the show to share your story, not to be self-promotional, not to sell something, but to share your story, please feel free to reach out at hello@sarahdean.com to help make those connections and introductions. And then last announcement, little housekeeping item, is that I'm working on a women's retreat for this fall. And I'm so excited. This is actually a retreat I've been wanting to run for a couple of years now, and I just haven't had the bandwidth and the capacity to do it, but I'm doing it this fall. So more information is coming, but this is going to be an event for leaders, individual contributors, small business owners, consultants, community organizers, like anyone who wants to show up and learn how to use their voice in new ways, learn how to leverage their voice for visibility, for power, for influence. It's going to be a ton of fun. We're going to be talking about things like self-trust. We're going to be talking about inner critic and imposter syndrome. We're going to be talking about how to communicate with confidence. We'll do some work around values. We'll do work around leadership, whatever that means for you. Everyone's a a leader in their own right. So we'll be working around that. It's going to be really incredible. What I know is that one of my biggest gifts is bringing women together in an in-person container, in an in-person environment, in a retreat setting, and that incredible magical things happen when I do that. Not only with the content that I'm able to share, but the transformations that happen with the individuals who attend, as well as the relationships that are built in those containers. And so that's all coming in the fall. So stay tuned. I just wanted to let you know now so you can start to get excited and keep your ears open. That will be in the fall in Seattle. And now for our episode today, we're going to be talking about how to turn panic into power when you freeze in a critical moment. And I have to give a shout out to a woman who approached me after a recent speaking engagement. And she came up and she said to me, what do I do when I freeze in a moment where I've been asked a hard question, or someone is asking something of me? Maybe it's in a situation, and I think we've all experienced this, where you have been asked a tough question, you are maybe feeling called out, like it might be your perception that you're being called out, or maybe you are being called out, but like the spotlight is on you and you just completely freeze and you don't know what to say. You don't know how to answer the question or how to show up in that moment. You don't know how to use your voice. And I know that we've all experienced that in some way. When we experience that, we can sometimes feel like physical and emotional things happening in our bodies. We can feel the room go silent. It feels like there's a spotlight on us that's just shining brighter and brighter in every moment. Sometimes it feels like we can't overcome the silence that has invaded our body. Like we literally cannot activate words. It can feel like time is stopped, and it feels like it's up to us to make time start again. Yet we feel completely unable to access the tools to actually start the time again. This can feel really scary, really overwhelming, and completely immobilizing. I've been there multiple times, even as a strong extrovert, someone who gets on stages all the time, someone who's not afraid of a microphone. I've been there in those moments for sure. And I know that there's a lot of people who don't sit behind microphones and get on stages and aren't nearly as extroverted as me, who struggle with this more often than I do. And I want to be able to talk to this and speak to this and give some tools and tips. The other thing I want to say about this is that when we are in these moments, what we feel internally is so different sometimes than what other people are witnessing. So when we feel ourselves freezing, we feel like, oh, everyone knows I don't know what to do next. And often that's not the case. And so we become immediately very sensitive to how long it's taking us to respond, to how to formulate the right words. And we feel as if everyone knows that we can't figure it out. And in so many cases, people have no idea. So I want to give you permission and invite you to really give yourself a little grace and a little bit of self-compassion in these moments, to recognize that what you're experiencing internally is not necessarily how other people are experiencing you. And the tips I'm going to walk through in just a minute are going to help you to continue to stay in that moment so that you can exude confidence, so that you can stay present, so that you can overcome whatever it is that you're kind of fumbling or stumbling through in order to get yourself to the other side. When we're in these moments, it can feel like, again, that time is frozen. It can feel like, 20 minutes has passed and I haven't said anything. And in reality, it's like, it's maybe been 3.5 seconds. And so time stops or slows down for us, but it's not necessarily like that for everyone in the room. I learned a lot about this in becoming more intentional about using pauses in my speaking. And so not necessarily situations where I froze, but just using like a 10-second pause and recognizing, gosh, if I intentionally use a 10-second pause, it feels like 10 minutes to me, but it doesn't feel like much time to anyone else. And watching other speakers and other facilitators practice those kinds of pauses and recognizing that silence doesn't have to be scary, and that not responding immediately doesn't mean that we're powerless. And in fact, we can use those pauses to gain power. And so I want to give you some tools to be able to do that. So let's get right into it. Let's first of all recognize what can be happening in those moments. So when you are in that moment where you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to say or do something right now, and I don't know what to say or do, and you have that freezing feeling, whatever that feels like to you. What is actually happening in your body? So your nervous system in those moments is doing one of a few things. When we feel confronted, whether it's aggressive or, it could be very like respectful and polite, but we just feel like confronted. We feel like, I don't know what to do in this moment. A few different things can happen in our nervous system. So sometimes we fight, sometimes we flight, or flee. Sometimes we freeze, and sometimes we fawn. Sometimes we do a combination of these things. So I know for me, if I'm asked a question and I don't know how to answer it, when I freeze, part of my process of freezing is also fawning. So fawning means that we're trying to placate someone else. So if I feel frozen, I'm like, oh shoot, I don't know what to say. I will just immediately start like stroking the person who needs whatever it is they need from me, where I'm like, you are so amazing. And I'm so grateful for you for asking that question. And thank you so much. And this is so fantastic, because I'm like, I don't know what to say right now. So I'm just trying to make this person stay comfortable while I manage my discomfort and think of what I want to say next. So thinking through, if you are someone who goes through fight, flee, freeze, or fawn when your nervous system feels activated in these kinds of moments. Some people get really defensive. That would be fight, right? Some people just leave altogether, shut down, don't say anything. That would be the flee. Freezing is like we're on the spot and we don't know what to do and we're just frozen, no words come out. And then fawning is, how do we make everyone else more comfortable? How do we take care of other people's needs instead of our own? When there's a perceived threat or a perceived or a stress response. So recognizing what your tendencies are can be really helpful. And then recognizing when you're in that moment to be like, oh, this is my body responding. My body is experiencing, and talking yourself through this very literally in the moment, like talking yourself through like, okay, my body is having, my nervous system is having a response right now. My nervous system is going into, freeze mode. And here's what I know about myself in freeze mode. Here's the tools I know to use in freeze mode. So you're really walking yourself through it in live time and acknowledging what's happening. I do this a lot with anxiety. I've had anxiety since I was a really little girl, pretty significantly. And I've had to recognize in certain moments when I have certain feelings or feel overwhelmed by certain things, like, oh, this is your anxiety. This isn't you. This is your anxiety. You're having a moment. Your anxiety brain is telling you this. And here's how you know that you can combat that or override that or work through that. So I've had to do this a lot in managing anxiety. And you can do this too in recognizing, like, this is my body doing this thing that it does. And here's the tools that I know to use as my defaults when my body goes into this default. So if freeze is your default, then you have those tools lined up and ready to go. And this is going to take a little practice because, like everything we talk about in communication, if you haven't done things multiple times, they don't necessarily come naturally and they might feel a little awkward and fumbly at first. But with practice, you will get better at this. And I will say, and having to sit on so many calls with organizational leaders. And sometimes, like, I'll go into a call for people who want me to come do a speaking engagement, and I'll think one person is going to come to the call. And sometimes 3 or 4 people are there. And I'm like, oh, wow, like I had no idea that the VP of like 3 different departments was going to show up to this call. And now I suddenly, like, I thought I was just meeting with this one person for this casual conversation. And it suddenly feels like very intense because of the number of people there and their roles and their titles and the amount of power that they have and the influence that they have in the organization. And I have to recognize, like, okay, this is where your anxiety tends to kick in. This is where you tend to start to over-explain things or talk in circles because that's what your anxiety brain does. So what are the new defaults that you're practicing? And for me, it's been practicing asking really good questions and taking really good notes, not centering my own, like, just like word vomit and word salad sometimes, but asking questions so that I can get more information. While I'm getting that information, I can configure concise responses in my head. And that's been my way of learning a new default. So today, let's talk about your way of learning a new default when you're in that freeze spot. So the first thing that I want you to do after you've done that recognition of here's what's happening from a nervous system standpoint is just recognizing that you can use your freeze as a pause to cultivate power. So you're intentionally going to use that freeze to take a moment and to give yourself power, to give power back to you. So using a pause and recognizing this is where I'm emotionally regulating. This is actually a demonstration of leadership maturity. I think of a really incredible leader that I've followed for many years, and I've seen her in a lot of kind of hot seat moments. And what I've seen her do over and over is be able to pause, take a deep breath, and give herself permission to respond in her own time. So when I feel nervous or anxious, or I feel a freeze coming on from me, I tend to just like start talking. Like my nervousness is just like throw all the words out. And like all the words start flying out of my mouth and I don't even know what I'm saying. Watching people who've used this pause to gain a sense of power while they're helping re-regulate their emotional, their nervous system and their emotional regulation has been a really amazing demonstration of leadership. So when you take that pause and you're saying like, I'm worthy of sitting in this moment and I'm worthy of making other people sit in this moment with me for a second so that I can say the right thing or so that I can say the best thing I can come up with right now. So really being clear on this is me giving myself permission to take back my power in this moment. That's what this pause is about. So taking a pause, a few seconds, take a deep breath, smile, or, show that you're still engaged, give eye contact. We're going to talk about body language in just a second. And then this is you stepping into, this is executive presence, right? This is you stepping into your presence to really ground yourself, to say or do whatever it is you want to say or do, which leads right into our next step. So the next step is going to be to ground yourself in the moment. So you're taking that pause, you're re-regulating that nervous system, you're taking, that big full breath, letting it out slowly, and really giving yourself permission to have the stage for a moment. Then what are you doing in that grounding? So taking that breath is going to be part of the grounding. The other thing that you can do that really can be grounding to you, but also grounding to the room, is to validate the question and maybe even repeat it. So one thing that I do, especially if I don't know what to say next, is I'll say, oh, that's such a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. When I say that, and I try to say it slowly, it's giving my brain a minute to catch up with the moment. Sometimes I'll repeat the question. So let's say that someone said to me, we're sitting in a meeting and someone says to me, we're in this really tough situation and we just need to know what you think the best course of action is. And I'm not prepared to give the best course of action. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I only have the same information as you, and I don't necessarily think I'm more qualified to answer this. And for me to say, that's such a great question. So you want to know what I think the best course of action is. Again, it's slowing down my thought process. It's letting my brain catch up. And then if I feel like, okay, I feel like I have a starting point now to start to answer this, great, go. But if I don't feel like I have that starting point in taking that pause, in validating the question and repeating the question, then the next thing I'm going to do is buy myself time. So the next thing I might do is ask a follow-up question. Say, can you say more about that? Tell me a little bit more about what you're looking for. Can you give me a little more information or context? Or ask a follow-up question like, hey, if they're saying, this is a really tough situation, we want to know what you think the best course of action is. I can say, it is a tough situation. And I can see, it's tough in this way and that way. I'm curious what else is hard right now. Or I'm curious, does anyone have a sense of direction we want to go before we look at like exact next steps? Or I'm curious if you've thought this through. I'm curious what other people are saying about this. So just like asking a follow-up question to get a little more information, that buys you time. That also shows that you're there, you're participating, you're engaging, but you are giving them the opportunity to give you more information, which hopefully that information will be helpful, but also, again, it gives your brain that chance to catch up. During this time, giving yourself permission to not have to have a perfect response right away. Giving yourself permission to talk things through, to say, what's coming to mind first for me is XYZ, but I want to give this a little more thought. So acknowledging like, I have some initial thoughts, or acknowledging like, the first thing I'm thinking is this, but I'm not sure if that's the only thing or the right thing or the full scope right now. So to be okay with, I have something to say here, but I'm not sure if this is the complete thought, and be okay with that. And like, then continuing the conversation so that you can get further into completing your thought, or to give yourself permission to say like, here's what I'm thinking right now. Can I get back to, I want to do a little more time thinking about this, or I want to look into this a little bit more. Can I get back to you? Or, give me 24 hours to get a little more information. So giving yourself permission to not need to respond 100% perfectly, to not need to have the whole, completely right answer. And then sometimes asking for more time and asking for like, hey, it's really important to me to get this right. This grounds credibility and authority, by the way. Not having an answer in the moment does not undermine your credibility. What undermines your credibility is sometimes trying to fake your way through it in a way where it's really obvious that you don't know, and you're not taking responsibility for wanting to figure it out and wanting to be resourceful and wanting to really own like, hey, I'm not totally sure, and it's important that I get this right. So instead of undermining your credibility by getting overly fumbly or, making things up where people are like, they clearly don't know what's happening right now, to instead be honest and say, it's important that I get this right. I'm going to need a little more time. That builds more credibility and more authority and more trust than to fumble your way through in a way where you're just like, I can tell I'm not getting this right, and I'm just going to keep riding it out. The other thing is to exude confidence with your body language and your voice. So practicing standing in your power, practicing using a strong voice, practicing sitting up tall, even if you're like, I just want to melt into the floor and hide. Practicing taking up space physically and using your voice. So tone of voice, projecting your voice, using volume as your friend, even if, because there's like, if I say, I don't really know, and I'm not really sure. Like if I say it in kind of this mousy, small voice, that's really different than, hey, I'm not really sure, but this is important to me. And I want to make sure I get this right. You can hear like my tone of voice can go a really long way versus, oh, I'm not really sure. And like kind of sitting back with my voice and being tentative or hesitant or playing small, instead to have an eagerness to like, I'm eager to be in this conversation. I'm eager to figure it out, even if I don't totally know right now. Again, being in that moment, sitting tall, making eye contact as much as you can, staying really present, and using your posture to lean into the conversation rather than to shrink back out of the conversation. Next is being yourself and honoring your personality in your brain. This is a really, really big one. And I've worked with some introverts who've done this so beautifully. So I love talking about this because I am not good at doing this sometimes. So if you are an introvert or if you're an extrovert, so I will say sometimes, as an extrovert, sometimes I'm externally processing things and I will give you more information that you need because I'm processing right alongside you. So what if as an introvert, you could say, as an introvert, sometimes I need a minute to collect my thoughts before verbalizing them. So can you circle back to me in 5 minutes? Or, hey, can I send a follow-up email after this? So not being afraid of honestly acknowledging, as an introvert, I need a minute sometimes to give you my best thoughts, because that's true, right? And I will say as an extrovert, like I will give you a lot of thoughts, but it's going to maybe take me 15 minutes to get to the best one. So why not like go with the introvert who can sit back for 5 minutes quietly and come up with one sentence that's perfect in many cases versus an extrovert like me who's going to talk in circles for 20 minutes before getting to the bottom line. So recognizing like there's pros and cons to both, right? Owning your personality type and how your brain works to work in your favor. You can also say as a deep thinker. So as a deep thinker, I always like to take a moment to put pieces together to formulate the ways I can be most helpful in situations like this. So identifying like I'm a really deep thinker, and so I'm still putting all the pieces together. So I'm going to, in order to do like give you the best thing I can give you in this moment, that requires me going into my deep thinking brain, and I can't do that in this second. And I want to make sure I give you what's most valuable to you into this moment. And then the last is not being afraid to revisit the conversation later, not being afraid to return to a conversation. So I know we've all had the situation where you feel on the spot, whatever you say, you don't feel like was the right thing. And then 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 days later, you're like, oh, that's the thing I should have said. And it comes to you and it hits you like a ton of bricks and you're annoyed and frustrated. It's okay to go back. This demonstrates thoughtfulness and conscientiousness. It demonstrates that you care. It demonstrates that you're invested. So going back and saying like, hey, I didn't quite get across the point I wanted to get across, or hey, I thought of this after the fact, and I think it's worth sharing now. I think this could be really valuable. Or I didn't have all the words, or I didn't connect all the dots in the moment. Here's something that I think could be really helpful that came to me later. So not being afraid of revisiting something to demonstrate that you care, that you've taken the time to think this through and you have something of value to add. It's not less valuable because it came 10 minutes or 2 days later. So I hope this helps you. I hope this helps you think through how you can turn panic into power when you freeze in those critical moments. Listen to this more than once if you need to. Listen to this before you're going into a high-stakes meeting, a high-stakes situation, if you are someone who has that propensity to freeze, because this will be really, really helpful. And then recognize that you're going to need to practice this a little bit, these steps over and over to become new defaults, and that it will become more comfortable and more automatic with time. Thank you for being here. I can't wait to be back next week. And until then, I am in this with you always. Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit sarahdean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at sarahdean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at sarahdeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.